Welcome to Living with AMD, Mind, Body, and Spirit. I'm Matthew Levine. I'm with the American Macular Degeneration Foundation. And our mission is to help all those affected by macular degeneration to live their best possible lives. To do this, we fund research for treatments and cures. We also provide education and resources. And also through our advocacy work, we raise awareness about important issues that impact your lives. And we voice your concerns to decision makers in Washington, D.C. And through programs like today's, we empower you with tools to improve your everyday quality of life. In today's program, we're going to be speaking about anxiety and depression, their connections to vision loss, and how you can find ways to heal both yourself and live productively and happily with your helper or partner. Dr. Ann Wagner is a board-certified clinical psychologist who's worked at the Minneapolis VA for the past 23 years, providing evidence-based assessments and interventions for PTSD and other trauma-related problems. Dr. Wagner herself is legally blind due to retinitis pigmentosa. Eric Ringham retired in May as a senior editor at Minnesota Public Radio News, where he supervised arts and education coverage. Before joining the NPR staff in 2009, he completed almost 30 years at the Star Tribune in Minneapolis, serving most of that time as commentary editor. And he and Ann live in South Minneapolis.
Hi, so we usually like to start by just sharing some information about us personally. So I grew up in a family that had this genetic eye condition of retinitis pigmentosa. I inherited it from my mom, who inherited it from her father. And the strain that my family has involves progressive worsening of or loss of peripheral vision. So there's predominant tunnel vision and night blindness. And the inheritance factor is if you have it, then any child you have has a 50-50 chance of inheriting it. So my mom and dad had 5 children and 4 of us inherited it. So of all my relatives, my family was the most heavily loaded with blindness. And I just want to say my mom is an incredible role model. And so I often share stories about her because she was quite inspirational to me.
And from what age did you know you were going to go blind?
As soon as I understood language, the doctors could tell the retina was starting to deteriorate. They would check the eyes really young. So by age 4, they could tell I inherited it. So I knew all along. And I was 17 when I met the legal statutes for blindness because of the peripheral vision loss.
But you were able to drive and things like that?
Briefly, until somewhere in my 20s. But I only drove quiet roads and not at night, of course. But at least I had that experience for a brief period. Yeah.
But as Matthew said, I'm Eric Ringham. I'm a journalist. I'm married to Ann, which is most of my experience with blindness. The other slight experience that I had was that my father suffered from macular degeneration, which he started experiencing when he was about the age I am now, about in his mid-60s. And he seemed even to take a kind of weird pleasure in telling me that it's handed down through generations and that I should expect to contract macular degeneration someday in my life. So far, there's no sign of it. He also had glaucoma, which there is no sign of in me yet. And with him, I learned a little bit about some of the etiquette of being a blind person's companion, the holding the elbow or letting them hold your elbow, walking slightly ahead, sort of telegraphing with your body when you're going up a curb or down a curb or, whatever is approaching. So when I met Ann, almost 20 years ago now, I was kind of irrationally proud of the fact that I knew a thing or two about how to comport myself as the companion of a blind person.
Yeah. Even though we didn't start dating till 9 years ago.
That's a much longer story.
That's a much longer story. But it was really cool that he knew. I didn't have to kind of educate him, so that was awesome.
And maybe there was a little bit of a lack of hesitation on my part to get involved with somebody who was blind.
Because you were familiar.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe it was not such uncharted territory for me.
Yeah. Even though I work for the Veterans Affairs healthcare system, I have a few disclaimers. One is that what I'm sharing today is in no way representing an official view of the federal government, and I am not entering into a clinical provider role with anyone who views this video. So I'm going to be sharing some principles today from my work as a psychologist that I think are helpful for coping with anxiety, depression, any kind of emotional suffering related to any sorts of issues, but we will certainly be highlighting the issues kind of specific to people with vision loss and the people maybe serving in the sighted helper role. So to maybe start off, when we think about emotions, we unfortunately in our society have been kind of programmed to judge our uncomfortable emotions as toxic and bad and something we have to struggle with and get rid of. And yet none of that's actually true. Those come from judgmental thoughts and messages, and we've inherited them. We're not to blame for them. They've been passed on generation after generation, this idea of if I'm not feeling something positive, it means there's something wrong. But judgments of right or wrong or good or bad, there's actually no truth or reality in those. Those are just language, they're thoughts. Our actual experience in the moment, our core authentic experience is our truth. And we've been taught to minimize and avoid our core authentic emotions. And if we could have been taught to allow them and to notice the truth of them, is that they show up to tell us what we care about. Our core emotions actually are directly connected to our heart, to our core being, and we get to validate and have compassion for them, and that's naturally healthy and healing. And it also honors, there's a natural urge or yearning when we're feeling any kind of emotional discomfort to seek support, to seek having one other person hear us and connect with us and be with us in that pain, and that's naturally healing. But we've been taught all this other stuff, messages of stoicism, and I know I'm stereotyping a bit, but I think men in particular have been given messages that to show any kind of emotions is somehow, what are the most common things you've been taught?
What? Repress, suppress, deny.
Because it means what? If you show
Weakness.
Or yeah.
Or a lack of manhood.
Yeah. And all of that is baloney. Sorry, I just used a judgment, but those are all judgments. There's no truth in any of them. Men have the same tear ducts and emotional world as women, across whatever gender. It's real.
But part of my instinct is not only to deny some of the emotions that I have, but also if Anne expresses emotions, we've discovered that I have a unfortunate tendency to try to help, rather than just listen, I want to step in and fix it.
Yep.
So I try to, she may be feeling bad about something and I'll try to talk her out of it. Yeah, it's not that bad. I've had so much worse. And that turns out to not really help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've all been taught all these ways of avoiding. So minimizing our own emotional, it's not that bad, or other people have it worse. And that is a form of an emotional defense or psychological defense. Yes, but I also want to note, we can certainly value having compassion for other people's suffering. So that's not always functioning as an avoidance when we minimize, but sometimes it is. Other people have it worse. So what do I have to complain about? And then we just suppressed and invalidated our own emotional pain. So then it's functioning as avoidance. But we also stay in our heads a lot. We love to intellectualize and rationalize, and therefore we're neglecting our hearts and our core. We do all sorts of distractions, keep busy, focused on something else. And we know substance use functions as avoidance of our emotional pain. There's just, and rumination. Oh my goodness, do we spend a lot of time caught up in our head in the, if only, ... if things could be different, or what if, ... or even the whys. Why is this happening? What have I done? And the way that's functioning as an avoidance is it's this mind being tricky because we've been taught to do this idea that if I just understood why, then maybe I won't feel what I'm feeling. Maybe there's something I can control and fix, and I won't feel what I'm feeling. But the reality in our moment, our experience in the moment will always give us the truth. I feel what I feel, and I feel those core emotions because they're telling me what I care about.
And I'm sorry, what?
I thought you were going to say something a moment ago, so I'm checking in.
Yeah, I basically want to say something about every 2 seconds. So but I repress, which is healthy. What we were just talking about. I completely lost my train of thought. Forgive me.
Well, if it comes back,
it will.
Okay.
Yeah, go on. What were you saying?
Okay, well, so when we think about the anxiety and depression related to vision loss, some emotions are so tricky that they are actually functioning as a defense, one of those psychological defenses I was just talking about, where the depression, which can feed apathy, where if I don't care, then I won't feel the hurt because it won't matter so much. And the thing is, when we care about something, it's like a coin that you can't have one side without the other. If I care, there are definitely going to be moments of hurt when the things I care about, I can't control. And so there's that emotion of helplessness, which is the most common emotion. And it's probably the one we struggle with the most because we only have control over one thing. And that's what we say or do in this one moment right now. We have zero control over the past, the future. We have zero control over what other people say, what they do, what they feel, what they believe. We have zero control over their values. We can't control anything except our own actions in this one moment. And what we know from a mental health perspective is that the more we do what we value in this moment, if we step into this opening and share authentically and act on a core value, that's being effective. It doesn't mean we're going to feel better because we actually can't control emotions. They show up to tell us what we care about, the positive ones and the more painful ones. They're going to keep showing up. But the anxiety, so I've just talked about how depression can function as an avoidance through that apathy to try to suppress our core emotions. But anxiety, people have kind of this general constant anxiety. Chances are that's functioning as a defense against some core emotions that have been suppressed. With this illusion of the fight or flight, which anxiety gives us that urge to fight or flight. Similar to anger, it gives us this urge to do, but it's functioning as a defense and an illusion of control. We can't control.
And the control issue, I would imagine, being blind is even more acute.
Yes. So for many people, when you have a progressive vision loss, like RP and the macular degeneration, means your mind has already encoded all sorts of memories and ideas and attachments. And we form attachments to ideas and our own abilities, just like we do to people. So when something has changed and we're no longer able to do what we used to do a year ago or 10 years ago, in that moment, the core emotion showing up is more than likely the helplessness that's telling us that we can't control anything except our own actions. But helplessness also tells us that we care about something. Otherwise, it doesn't show up. It's a very important emotion. And part of recovery work is learning to validate that emotion. Of course, the helplessness is showing up. Of course, I care about being maximally, optimally functioning the way I would most want. And I can't control what the vision loss has now had to enter my life, a limit. I can't do this. And I care about the fact that I can't do it. So then we get into the deeper emotion of grief and loss. So I don't know, some people, that I work with who have progressive vision, because sometimes veterans have progressive vision loss, as well as other physical conditions that involve progressive loss of abilities. So they're sometimes surprised to realize the core of this, it's a grieving process, and it's sort of become a chronic one because it's not just one loss and then you adjust and you're okay for the rest of your life. It's progressive. I know for me, the noticing when I could no longer see pen or pencil. And then I had to go to Sharpie marker. And then when that was getting difficult without a big CCTV machine, so many little things. And each one, when you attempt to do something and all of a sudden you realize, oh, I can't do that now without some assistance or some accommodation or some problem solving, that's a moment of grief and loss. And that takes it's important to take the time to kind of validate that and potentially seek support. What, you were going to say something?
You keep on noticing. I think there's a breathing pattern when I have a thought strike me.
Yeah.
Well, I want to know whether there's some, as you experience that grief and loss, is there a way in which my role as a helper plays into the dynamic? Do you try to use me to reassert control over things that you can't control yourself?
So if the intended task that I want to complete is important to me, I'm going to be problem solving then. That's what I have control in the moment to do, but I would want to validate that this is a grief and loss. And I have this attachment to this idea of me being able to do it myself because of my value of self-sufficiency and independence. And I'm going to want to validate that, like, oh, I'm grateful that I have that kind of value because it means a lot to me. But I also value being effective, and asking for help is actually being effective if it's something important to you and you're not able to do it on your own and you need brainstorming help or ideas or an actual sighted helper to do it. And to be able to affirm that I am standing with dignity and integrity to ask for help. It's not a sign of weakness, as so many people would.
So
can I just ask a question quickly?
Yeah.
I noticed that Eric, you refer to yourself as a helper, and you refer to asking for help. And I think very frequently in the macular degeneration community, and perhaps other chronic disease communities, we hear the term caregiver. But you seem to distinguish between caregiver and helper. And why do you use helper, or refer to yourself, Eric, as helper, and Anne, why do you use the term helper instead of caregiver?
I have an answer to that.
Go for it.
I happen to be good at certain things, and Anne is good at certain things. And like as in any couple, if one is short and the other is tall, the short one may ask the tall one to reach for something on the shelf, and that doesn't constitute caregiving. It's just helping. I don't like the implication of the term caregiver. It suggests that there's something wrong with Anne, and there's not. I'm not here to take care of her in any more sense than she's here to take care of me. We take care of each other. But by assigning me the role of caregiver, you're sort of implying that that she's less than, and that I'm performing an act of charity or altruism or something.
Or a sense of power over something.
Well, that too. But nothing could be further from the truth. I've gotten, as I tell anybody, I get the better end of this deal by a long shot.
And I have similar reasons for I like the term sighted helper. Caregiver, it does have a lot of attached meaning of something more fully, like somebody who is not able to function much at all on their own, and they need like a full-time caregiver to care for them. And in those situations, that those words may be the valued term, and if both people are comfortable with those words, I wouldn't judge the meaning for some people. We just know we prefer helper and sighted helper and asking for help.
And more than that, much more than half the time, I'm not helping at all. I'm just a companion. I'm just a partner. I'm a husband. I'm a spouse.
Yeah. But this issue of the grief and loss, when there is something that I can't do anymore, I do ask Eric's assistance, and he's right there. I often say, can I use your eyes? Can I borrow your eyes? And because that's what my mom did, when she would ask us to help her. And
my dad, who long before he had vision loss, would hold up his coffee cup at the dinner table and say, dear, which was his way of asking for a cup of coffee. Was she his caregiver in that moment? I mean, there are a lot of issues about how my parents dealt with things that we won't really get into here. But there's just the normal give and take that any couple has, and we have it this morning, and made delicious homemade caramel rolls from scratch, and I ate them.
Yeah.
Who's helping whom?
Yeah.
Who's caring for whom?
Yeah. So thank you for asking that question, Matthew, because it implies that there's a thoughtfulness in the language we're using, and we can be kind of deliberate and think about the meanings and what messages they might convey as we try to step into moments of authentic truth sharing instead of buying into judgments. But again, I wouldn't judge if other people choose to use that term caregiver. It's whatever feels right at your core for you. But the message we're really wanting to convey today is the importance of connecting in, noticing the ways we may suppress or try to avoid our emotional pain, which can actually feed the anxiety and the depression, and being able to connect with what are the core emotions. It could be the helplessness, it could be the grief and loss, and it could be the fear. As our mind gives us these scenarios of future, we can anticipate, like for me, I know I'm going to eventually be totally blind, and I'm going to have this more and more grieving of the things I'm still able to do now, that I'm going to need assistance. I'm going to have to ask for help more and more. And that is going to hurt. I'm going to have some emotions of hurt because I value being independent, self-sufficient, and I get to validate that hurt. And it's going to actually urge me to continue to do the things I am able to do by myself, because that's important to me.
One of the things that's been an issue from time to time is that I'm a lot less particular in some of my tastes than Anne is. And if she goes, for example, if we go shopping together and she's looking for a particular product, perhaps a particular brand name, perhaps a particular variant of a brand name, she wants that thing. And so we're going up and down the aisles, and it's a crowded store, and you're trying to keep your distance from people because of COVID and everything. And I'm looking as best I can, and I can't find that particular thing, but I find something that's very, very close to it. It's very similar. It maybe doesn't have the extra ingredient of something. Yeah, I mean, it's good enough by any man's standard. Not to be sexist and overgeneralizing, but by my standards and those I was raised with, this product here, this is fine, this is good enough. But then I'll tell Anne, well, look, I found this, and she'll say, and she wants to keep on looking. But it's my eyes we're using for the looking, and it's getting to be kind of stressful for me to keep on looking for this very particular choice. And here's the thing. Almost 100% of the time, I'm wrong, she's right. They do have that particular thing. And a good portion of the time, she's actually the one to find it.
I feel around for the package so that I know what's familiar, and I'm like, is this it? And then he'll like,
yeah,
you found it.
So whatever frustration I have in not being able to find exactly what she's looking for is frustrated further by the fact that she was right all along.
But this is a moment where, because I love him and I care about his stress level, and when I feel like my needs are actually somehow interfering with his need that day to not have this extra stress. And there are many times where I will say... Are you going to say
that you settle for good enough?
I've settled for good enough on at least 5 occasions. Yes.
Oh my gosh, we may need to take a break here.
No.
We need a sidebar.
Because I get to, it's a dilemma, and I get to decide what I stand for in that moment. And when I can tell your stress level because of my need, I will totally say that's good enough, and let's go.
Huh.
I get to be a loving partner also, and I stand by that, and there's no judgment in it. So that's the compromises.
How much of the time would you say that happens, dear?
I said it was only 5 times
Okay.
out of all these times. It's okay. So the sharing, the being able to be with your own emotions, and then inviting others who love you to be able to say, I'm feeling some emotional pain here related to this moment here where I wanted to do something and I can't. And I just need to be heard. I need to not feel alone with that pain. For I think it's almost universal that that's kind of what we really, really need for optimal connectedness and support. That's the kind of support that most people feel is the most helpful. If we need advice, then being clear about asking for advice, but also letting the person I'm not asking for advice here. If what we need is to just be heard and to say, can you please just be with me and indicate that you're understanding the pain and you're here. So I'm not alone with it. And
So
then,
I've got a quick question here again, because you, as with most people, both of you are living incredibly full lives, and they're being lived together, but also parallel. So let's say, Anne, you're experiencing a further loss of vision, which is causing you to experience grief. And because of your exquisite training, you really can pinpoint this, recognize it, and express it as you've just described to Eric. But Eric has had a full day. He's got something going on. He's really frustrated with something. How does it look in real time when you're asking for this kind of sharing and validation of your feelings from a person who loves you but is also quite burdened? Because I think this happens a lot in life.
yeah, excellent question.
Then go ahead with your excellent answer.
No, because he's asking you.
Wow.
How do you work through that moment when I have a need to process an emotion and you've got all these other things on your plate? Of course you do. So what?
The other things on my plate are usually not stressful moments of. We're talking especially about vision loss here.
Anything,
We're
whatever is
talking about
going on in your
just
life.
just the grief of progressive vision loss or a bad day. When it's a bad day,
The deeper grief.
okay, the deeper grief. This is something I'm painfully aware of, actually. The fact that I feel like I've gone an exceptionally long time without much grievous loss. All of my original nuclear family is gone. Everybody passed away before me, and I've gotten close to Anne's family. She's lost both of her parents, and that's been hard for me, but much more hard for her. And the grief of vision loss is something that is such a continual thing for Anne that it doesn't come up that explicitly very often, except that once in a while she feels deeply frustrated over, if she has like 3 bumbles in a row of things that she, a dish breaks, or she trips over something that isn't usually where it is, that's where it usually isn't, or some other vision loss related thing. Sometimes she does exhibit a little frustration that I realize it's not mine to make better. It's not up to me to help soothe that moment. But in terms of comparing it to any of the grief or loss or bad day things that I go through, it's nothing. I mean, I don't have anything that compares to what she goes through on a pretty daily basis.
So when I am expressing a need to be heard and you've got everything else on your plate in that moment,
I have to learn to shut up and give you a chance to be heard. And it's very rare that I have something that is pressing enough that I want to talk about it in that moment. I almost never have. I almost never have anything that compares to the kind of stress that Anne goes through. Sometimes I notice that some little sign that that she doesn't see as well as she did a year ago. Sometimes I notice that independently, and it gives me my own special little moment of not really grief, but a somber realization that yes, indeed, this condition is progressing. It used to be that Anne always knew where I was and talked to me talked in the direction where I was. Now sometimes she talks in a different direction. And it's noticeable it's like there's a third person in the room, you know, she's talking over my shoulder. Or,
Yeah. So I think I'm wondering though if with Matthew's getting at with this question is if there's a time where I'm needing to process just to be heard with some emotional pain related to the vision loss, and if you in that moment had some other value, I know you love me, and I'm hearing you say you would want to make space for that universally, that I'm that important to you. But what if there was something else really, really important to you that I think we would you would just let me know, I really want to be here for you, and can we talk later? And I would say, because I know your intention is to be here for me, I can table it. I can do my own processing for a while and trust that I'll be able to talk it through with him later. But that's because we have had all these years of working on pretty clear communication. But I would encourage people to be understanding if somebody else's plate is so full right there that they feel they're not able to really be, like, I really want to be with you, but I'm so distracted right now. I'm facing this dilemma, and I think I really need to take care of A, B, and C, and then I'll be able to really be with you. Would you mind waiting? I respect that, because that's still somebody being authentically sharing what's going on in their world in that moment, and it's not minimizing my needs. It's negotiating the timing of when we do this. But even a gentle, I love you, I'm with you, and we'll talk more. And then following up on it.
It's good to know. Thank you, Matthew, for the opportunity to find this out. It's good to know that that it's okay, that I have permission to say that. But I don't know when I'm ever going to have anything that competes. I'm just not that complicated.
Yeah.
Well, let's hope that life leaves things as they are then.
Yeah.
I just in our remaining time, I just wanted to focus, Anne, on the individual and the individual experience of grief and loss, because a lot of people who with macular degeneration, it's a disease that manifests itself most profoundly later in life. A lot of people wind up single later in life because they've lost a spouse. Is there a practical way that a person can process this grief and experience a healing effect alone?
Yes. The kind of internal, connecting to your own internal emotional world from a loving compassion stance. I'll work with people with imagery. If they were to picture a deeply loving image towards something hurting, like picturing comforting a hurt puppy, or something that feels meaningful, and just being with it, we can be with our own grief and loss and affirm, of course this mattered to us, and connect to our integrity and dignity, that of course we value being as functioning and optimizing our functioning as best we can. And yeah, it means there's going to be some work ahead in problem solving. How do I access resources that can help me do this? Calling state services for the blind or other organizations that might help, or taking a risk to ask a neighbor who maybe you know slightly to say, hey, sometimes I may need somebody with some eyes to help with this, or this. How would you feel about that? Whatever the problem solving is, that's coming, and that's extra, problem solving, but we have that capacity. So trusting yourself that whatever's needed, trust that you can engage in problem solving or seek out help with the problem solving. One of the things I really, really hope from the organizations like yours, Matthew, or FFB, or things like that, I'm hoping there could be more like support chat lines where people can share their ideas for problem solving, and for that support need to say, hey, I'm having a grief moment and I just need to be heard. Is anybody able to chat with me right now, or over the phone? So seeking support as you're able, inviting people to just be a deep listener, and accessing resources. Even if we're alone, we can do that kind of self-soothing work. It's just so important to try not to avoid it, but to allow it to flow naturally. Emotions are like waves. They peak and pass, and yeah, they may come back because they need to be heard again by us. It's really important to not invalidate our own emotions.
We've spoken, or you've spoken now, about the ways that we in our society have learned to suppress our feelings, to try and avoid them at all costs. And we've talked about many of the methods that we use. But just thinking about myself, I know I have these mechanisms within me, and we all have these mechanisms within us, and they are really deeply embedded in us to the point that we don't know we're doing them. And we spend an extraordinary amount of time actually avoiding our feelings and, in a sense, leaving them unaddressed so that they continue to operate. They keep sending out those reminders to us that I'm here, I need attention, and yet they don't seem to penetrate our activities in our life. Could you talk a little bit more about recognizing, identifying the feelings, recognizing them, and how we can pause and allow those feelings to rise to the surface so that we can experience them?
Yeah. Excellent question. So the recognizing the avoidance patterns are probably any given moment, most of us are probably engaging in something subtly avoidance-based. We're either suppressing, ignoring through distraction, and the typical practices that we've already talked about are usually we're spending a lot of time in our heads. That's such a predominant one. So being able in the moment to check in throughout the day, starting a practice of mindfulness really is the ultimate core of what's going to help, is in this moment, just checking in. What am I feeling? What am I feeling in my body? Is there some tenseness? What might be going on? I'm trying to really learn to listen to the core, your core self. And it's probably been pretty lonely for a long time because, again, we've been taught all these messages from the time we were itty bitty kids, the messages of somehow it's not okay to feel what we feel or to express it. And that's why it's so deeply embedded, why we engage in this avoidance, is the messages of stop crying. There's nothing to cry about. We are told right there, we're supposed to not feel what we feel, and we're supposed to be able to control it, or we are going to be judged and not accepted. And we have a core, natural, healthy yearning to feel accepted and have a sense of belonging. So that's being jeopardized. So you're darn right. I'm going to learn how to suppress and pretend that I'm not feeling what I feel so I can have approval. But that comes from a judgment. It's not at all truth in our actual experience. In that moment as a child, I felt scared and hurt, and I was naturally expressing it. I was doing what's healthy, and I was seeking support from the adults around me, and instead I got judged. And we've all had it, and it's pervasive. Movies, TVs, magazines, every message we look around is about somehow having a facade and not honoring our authentic selves. People engaging in violence. It's an illusion of control. It's to suppress the deep pain. So I'm going to act on the anger. It's all avoidance of our core emotions. So being able to check in, slow down, take a deep breath, what the core emotion might be. And almost always it's going to be helplessness, which is trying to tell you the truth, that you can't control something you wish you could in this one moment, and that's a truth, and that you care about it. Then connecting, what is it I care about? Again, that deeper, oh, it's a loss, or it's a hurt, or it's a frustration, or it's a fear. Oh, what is that saying I care about? Oh, I care about connectedness. I care about being understood and not judged. Or I care about optimizing my own functioning and being independent. And then being able to just be with that for however the emotion lasts as a wave. But the daily reflecting, what am I feeling at the core? What feels like it's trying to avoid that? And the defense is showing up. And starting to get reacquainted, just moments. And if tears show up, that's healthy for all people. It is healthy. That's why we have tear ducts. It's not just when we get something stuck in our eye. It's a natural human expression, and it's healthy if we need to cry. Or just sometimes it's still real, even if tears aren't elicited. We can feel it in our body. There's a heaviness to the sadness or the hurt. Oh, I just need to validate that, be with it. So it's the checking in through mindfulness in this one moment, trying to just quiet everything else to just be with yourself. Some people value journaling or speaking it out. Sometimes music can help people get in touch with suppressed emotions. So those are some thoughts. Does that sort of answer the question, or?
Yes, it absolutely does. Just want to thank the both of you for sharing all this experience and knowledge with us. And I have a sense that there's a lot more that we can learn from you. So we hope that we could visit with you again in the near future.
Absolutely. Thank you.
It's great talking to you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for being with us today. The American Macular Degeneration Foundation seeks to improve quality of life for those affected by macular degeneration, whether that's patients, family, friends, or anyone in their network. If you'd like more information on any of our programs or materials or our Eat Right for Your Sight cookbook, you can visit our website at www.macular.org, or you can call us at 1-888-622-8527. Thank you again, and be well.